I'm going to be responding to a claim Ronald Reagan was told about the diversion of funds from the Iran deal to supply to the Contras. So some really quick background, the Iran-Contra affair was a secret arrangement in the 1980s to provide funds to the Nicaraguan Contra rebels from profits gained by selling arms to Iran. So my opponent's secondary claims were, the first one was Reagan was aware of both the Iran arms for weapons deals and the Contra support by his administration. His second claim was Reagan attempted to cover up the Iran arms sales. His third claim was Reagan showed that he knew Oliver North had access to outside monies to aid the Contras. His fourth claim was Reagan met with North regularly. Fifth was Reagan authorized the diversion, and his sixth and final claim was Reagan may have been told about the diversion and forgotten about it. So my response to the first claim was that Reagan was not aware of the Contra support by his administration. In the 1990 testimony, it was finally found that the National Security Advisor Poindexter had personally authorized the diversion of money to the Contra rebels, all the while withholding the information from President Reagan. And President Reagan at the moment knew only about $12 million in the account, but no knowledge about other funds. My response to his second claim was that Reagan had no knowledge about Oliver North's deep involvement in aiding the Contras. So in 1990, when the report was released, excerpts from the Iran-Contra report stated that the OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, could not prove that Reagan authorized or was aware of the diversion, or that he had knowledge of the extent of North's control of the Contra resupply network. My response to his third claim, which was Reagan did not authorize any diversion involved within the Iran-Contra affair. So the Chicago Tribune stated in 1990 that Reagan was hazy on the Iran-Contra affair, stating former President Ronald Reagan in testimony made public on Thursday after the testimony said he had no recollection of ever being told that profits from Iran weapons sales were diverted to the Nicaraguan Contras, and that he never had any inkling that White House aide Oliver North was secretly helping the guerrillas. Second, Reagan also stated in his address to the nation of the Iran arms and Contra aid controversy on March 4th of 1987, "I'm confident the truth will come out about this matter. As well, as I told the Tower Board, I didn't know about any diversion of funds to the Contras, but as president, I cannot escape responsibility." My response to his sixth claim was that Reagan had full knowledge of possible mental deterioration. The Times doctor reporter, Dr. Lawrence K. Altman, has been a reporter for the Times since 1969, and he he recently just retired, politics through journalism and also treated political characters. He stated that I reported on Mr. Reagan's health, and he told me that his mother now had died of senility, and that if he were to develop it in office, he would resign. And Dr. Lawrence K. Altman also stated, a study published in 1988 suggested that Mr. Reagan had some cognitive impairment during his debates with President Jimmy Carter and Mr. Mondale, but the author said that their findings were insufficient to conclude that the changes affected Mr. Reagan's policy judgments and ability to make decisions. So following a year of the Iran-Contra affair, Reagan did not have any changes that would jeopardize his ability to make decisions in office. And that questions my opponent's evidence, because his evidence was from Reagan's letter from 1994, which was 8 years after the Iran-Contra scandal. And in his letter, he publicly stated that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and passed away 10 years after. So in conclusion, in spite of Ronald Reagan's limited knowledge of the Iran-Contra affair, there were several factors that suggested Reagan acted with good intentions. Thank you.
All right, well, it looks like you've mostly got good rebuttal issues to most of the points that the advocate presented. There's not really much analysis of the advocate's argument or the proof that they provided. It's basically a counterclaim on each of the points that you are offering. And I think all of those counterclaims are applied pretty directly, and you've got a good source on it. You explain your own reasoning very effectively. Like I said, in contrast to the argument that the advocate's presenting, I think you could probably do a good job showing that your counterclaim is more believable and more reasonable than the way that the advocate's making their inference. But you don't really tell us those sorts of things. You just kind of give us the counterclaim and the evidence to support that claim. I thought that you did a good job providing evidence for those particular points. That was effective, and and all the signposting is very clear and easy to follow for the most part. I thought your analysis of the way the whole process worked seemed reasonable as well. Like I said, I think that there could be some criticism of the advocate's arguments and reasoning, but you kind of rely basically on the narrative that happened in history to address those issues. And I guess if we were having a debate, for instance, that the advocate would be called upon to be more specific in their criticism of these particular arguments that were presented, which do cast some doubt on what the advocates talked about. I think the information that Poindexter is the one who is responsible for approving this is pretty important. It's not Reagan who is responsible for approving that, and that that Reagan had limited knowledge. The one place where you're citing the report that says that he didn't know how deep Oliver North's involvement in the process was. I think that's pretty good. The advocate's evidence says, well, he met regularly with North. So the question then becomes, well, does meeting regularly mean that he's going to be aware of information? Did North not tell him information? They had hearings about all this kind of stuff. Here's what the conclusion of those hearings was. That seems to be like it's a better way of interpreting this information than the way the advocate's talking about it. I think you needed a little bit more contrast like that. All right, thank you.